Well, thank you again, everyone, so much for joining and staying with us here. We'd like to start our amazing panel discussion. To introduce our fantastic moderator here, Professor Vincent Sutherland, who will introduce the panelists and also lead this discussion. So Professor Sutherland is an associate professor of clinical law and the faculty director of the Center on Race, Inequality, and Law at NYU Law School. He also teaches the Criminal Defense and Reentry Clinic and co-teaches a colloquium on race and inequality and a one-hour reading group on race in the criminal justice system. He holds a BA from the University of Connecticut, a JD from Temple University School of Law, and an LLM from Georgetown University Law Center. Thank you so much for being here and leading this.
Thanks so much for that incredibly kind introduction. What an incredible film. I don't know about you, but I think someone's cutting onions in here. Just so very powerful. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with this wonderful panel. So I'll start by introducing them all, and then we'll kind of dive right into it. I'll start with Brent Buell, who's seated to my immediate right, to your left. He is a playwright, producer, director, and writer. For 10 years, he directed the theater with rehabilitation through the arts in New York's maximum security prisons with plays ranging from John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men to his comedy Breaking the Mummy's Code, which premiered inside Sing Sing Correctional Facility. I think we saw some of that tonight. That production was the inspiration for A24's this movie, which was directed by Greg Kedwar and starred Oscar-nominated Coleman Domingo, Clarence Macklin, and Oscar-nominated Paul Raci in the role of Brent. Buell's experiences provided the basis for his chapter Drama in the Big House in the book Performing New Lives, Prison Theater by Jonathan Shaler. Buell's plays include the comedy The Gem Exchange and The Gate, a drama about parole he co-authored with Charles Moore. His novels include the political parody Rapturous and Daniel and My Revelation. Let's give Mr. Buell a hand. Seated next to Mr. Buell is Shakuri Carpenter. He is an accomplished screenwriter, a poet, and a youth mentor. He is a founder of both a nonprofit organization, From Bars to Beyond, which is dedicated to mentoring youth and spotlighting stories of post-conviction transformation, as well as a startup company, Transcendence Media, which provides video production and 3D graphics services. He holds several degrees, including an associate's degree in behavioral science from Mercy College, a certificate in business administration from Baylor University, a bachelor's degree summa cum laude from Mercy College, and a master's degree from New York Theological Seminary. In 2020, after living his entire life believing that he was a U.S. citizen, ICE detained him and placed him in deportation proceedings based on their claim that he had been born in Haiti, a country he has yet to set foot on. He continues to be at risk of deportation as he fights his legal case, which includes an application for pardon from Governor Hochul. We'll give a hand to Mr. Carpenter. And last but certainly not least, John Divine G. Whitfield. He is the real-life person that Coleman Domingo portrays in the movie Sing Sing. He was an executive producer, co-writer of this Oscar-nominated screenplay, and made a cameo appearance in the movie, as you saw toward the end of the film. As depicted in the movie, Divine G. served 25 years in prison for a murder he did not commit, despite finding overwhelming evidence of his actual innocence. While in prison, he co-founded Rehabilitation Through the Arts, a program that helps incarcerated people grow through creative expression. Oscar-nominated adapted screenplay writer Divine G. won several international writing competitions, has published 8 novels, 5 audiobooks, numerous screenplays, and since its release in 2012, Divine G. founded Divine G. Entertainment and continues to fight for his exoneration. So why don't we give him a hand as well. Now, before we begin the conversation, I want us to ground the conversation and ground the connection between Sing Sing and this university. In 1833, when NYU began construction of a new building on the eastern edge of Washington Square Park, the University Council, who was encouraged by influential statesmen, decided it would be cheaper to secure marble for the building from prison labor from the newly constructed Sing Sing prison. That decision resulted in a riot of professional stonecutters and an occupation of Washington Square Park, the first organized labor riot in New York State. The marble from this original building can still be found in Founders Memorial located in the Schwartz Plaza, which sits just east of Bopes Library on this campus. Okay, so there's a deep connection in more ways than you can imagine between Sing Sing and this university. What I want to start with, though, beyond that connection, is asking all of you about life in prison more generally, or in terms of this particular program. The film makes an intentional choice, I think, to focus on moments of resilience and community. It shows what can happen when we recognize the humanity of people behind bars, and we extend opportunities that highlight and affirm that humanity. But what's not depicted here are the many obstacles, the resistance, the hateful rhetoric that preceded the program's inception. And we know that because of that sort of resistance and rhetoric, the conditions in the vast majority of prisons in the United States are far from the realm of what RTA is trying to create. Right now, we're in a moment of heightened awareness of that dichotomy, with the last 3 weeks culminating in a strike, a prison guard strike, that ended with the firing of some 2,000 officers who were just terminated yesterday morning as an agreement was reached to bring the strike to a conclusion. Most importantly, though, beyond all of that, 8 people were killed by prisons since the start of the strike, right? Nine people were killed by prisons since the start of the strike, including one person who at Sing Sing died of suicide. In terms of this particular program, or life in prison more generally, I want to ask all of you, each of you, what is something that the film does not depict that you think is important for people to know and understand about life in prison? And why don't we start with Shakori?
Oh, okay. Well, let me just acknowledge everyone's presence in this room. Each of you, I deeply appreciate your attendance. And I'm grateful for your soaking in a subject matter that is rarely the topic of social discussion. And it is the impact of certain programs that we, individuals like myself and Divine, have founded from behind a wall to have an impact on how we develop, how we rethink about who we are as a person. And the film touches on many small nuances that you may not see unless you watch it for like the third or fourth time, right? But one of the things that that I could identify that you probably didn't pick up from the film because it's not really touched upon is this very unnecessary dichotomy between those who wear a uniform that happen to be blue and those who wear a uniform that happens to be green. And this sort of invisible force that makes one believe that they have control over the other, and to a point of antagonism, of control, of belittlement. And I think we don't really understand how putting two groups of people behind a wall and give them roles in which are so filled with conflict doesn't need to be that way. Does not need to be that way. And so, you know, I spent nearly 25 years of my youth up until my latter part of adulthood behind these walls. And you really don't get a real, like a sociological understanding of what's operating on the ground with, on one side, the people who are incarcerated and live there with each other, and those who come in as officers. And So, just a quick anecdote. I first walk into a prison for the first time, and I am met with utter disrespect right off the bat, as if that's the default position that officers should take in order to establish that they're in control and you stay in your place. But fast forward 4-5 years, when I walk past that same officer, I'm giving him a high five. What happened? What was the transformation that allowed him to put away his facade of authority and to look at me as a human being? And it was simply that, getting to know me as a human being. And so when we decide that there's a point where we don't actually need these masks, that we don't need, these plateaus in which we can defend our position against the other, that's when we can actually have a meaningful dialogue, and we can bring together people who may be at odds with each other and have them sit down face to face and understand that, there's a place beyond having conflict that you can reach to if you just stopped for a moment and thought about the other person as someone who you would interact with normally on the other side of the wall. So that's one thing that you don't really see in the film is, this how there's this play between what we on one side as incarcerated people perceive the other side to be, and vice versa. And I don't know if that'll ever change, because it's kind of built into the system. But RTA was a program that allowed us to dare and consider that. Just because you wear blue in a uniform and you come in, you clock in, and then you go home 8 hours later, doesn't make you my oppressor by default. But it's the actions that you may think make you more powerful or gives you a position of authority. That's where, the problems can come in, and a lot of unnecessary misunderstandings. Yeah. So I wish there was a little bit more of a conversation around that dichotomy from the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because in some ways, this film is helping to break down that dichotomy that I think society writ large has about people who are on the inside. That impression, that notion that you're less than, that you don't, not deserving of dignity, respect, humanity, right?
Right.
And so I think, that's an incredibly powerful way of looking at it. Divine, I want to ask you the same question. When you think about this particular program or life in prison more generally, what do you think was something that the film does not really depict, or what's missing from the film that you think is important for people to know about?
Well, excuse me. This kind of like piggybacks off of what Shakur says, but what the film doesn't depict is that when we were putting on these productions, first of all, I'm a founder member of RTA, and when we created this program, it was extremely difficult. The administration put up so much resistance, it's remarkable. And this is what you don't see in the movie. It looks like everything was going smooth, everything was just laid out, it's like a red carpet. It was always an uphill battle. And when we initially started this program, the whole mission is to bring people together, to show individuals that we can take this environment and use it as a way to make us better, to make us stronger, to make sure that when we leave, we don't come back to prison. It's a whole spectrum of things that we wanted to do. And when we had our first production, we were putting on sets like it was the Little Rascals. We was painting pictures and sheets, and You know, it was almost a joke. But when the administration started seeing that we were taking it seriously, they were gradually putting their guards down. That's the upper administration. But at all points, the lower administrations, like the correction officers, for some strange reason, they were always brutal. They were blocking us. They were even sabotaging us, taking things and making it look like we did it. And let me tell you something. It's a miracle we are still moving and growing and producing despite all of that. And one of the things that you didn't see much of is the fact that there was a lot of violence in the prisons. I mean, it was, even though you see it subtly, but the violence was extreme. And when people came into our program, it was transforming them in such ways that, you know, it was mind-boggling. And that's what made the administration start realizing that maybe we should kind of take this program a little more seriously. Even though you see subtle elements in that, but it took a lot of work. It took a lot of sacrifice, and it took a lot of showing and proving that, yo, we here to help. We not here to make this place worse. We here and we making it better. And we had one advocate that was for us. His name was Brian Fisher. He was the superintendent of Sing Sing. This came many years after RTA was in existence. You know, and as a founding member, believe me, we had a lot of rough roads. So when he came on, he was the kind of superintendent who was willing to take risks because he heard of our reputation. And when he got there and became the superintendent, you know, I met him personally, we talked, and he saw how serious we was. So he was willing to take risks that other superintendents wouldn't dare take. And that right there kind of broke the whole, you know, that wall that was just built and was just so solid that it almost seemed impenetrable. Then he started letting us get a little costumes. He started letting us do a little things. And the more he gave us, the greater and the greater this program got. Then, as a founding member, our mission was to make sure that we was able to touch people outside of Sing Sing. So we had like a requirement that if you left this particular jail, when you go there, try to set up another RTA. And thanks to civilians like Brent and Catherine Barkins, even Laura right here, she was one of the fighters that was right there from almost the beginning. But without them, RTA wouldn't expand it to Fishkill. It wouldn't expand it to the women's prisons. It wouldn't expand it to Woodburn. It expanded to the point that we had like 8 facilities. That's not really mentioned in the movie. Our mission was to share this with as many people as we could, because when you're a person that love human beings and want to help and want to heal and want to grow and want to expand, I think you have a mission to make sure that you share this. If you're the only one that's embracing it, it's really worthless. It's absolutely worthless. So love is about sharing it, and that's not shown in the movie. But I tell you one thing, despite all the hell they was giving us, it seems like we were like Incredible Hulks. The more anger and more stuff you threw at us, the stronger our love got, and the more we fought to keep this thing intact. And you know, that was the root of RTA.
And you know, Divine, one of the things that you just said and we're talking about, and what I find so compelling about when you think about people's lives in prison, is that ostensibly prisons are supposed to rehabilitate people. That's what they say. But the people who are doing the most work in terms of creating programming to help people live the lives that they want to live are the people who are inside the prisons themselves, who are serving sentences, right? And so
that is absolutely correct. When you hear this word correction, I mean, it's a complete joke. When you walk into prison, the minute you come into prison, they basically throw you into one of these superficial so-called programs that are totally obsolete. They'll have you doing some woodwork stuff, and nobody's really taking it serious. And it's just like a warehouse, plain and simple. It's a warehousing. And they even have a policy that if you come in there like guys like me and Shakur that came in there with 25 years, they don't even look at you. They just throw you in the yard and let you just run wild or whatever. And the only time you become important is when you get like 5 years to the board. But now that means you did 20 years just running around like a chicken with your head off. So we seeing that this right here was really the cause of a lot of the chaos, the violence, the confusion, and the chaos. And we said, listen, the only way we're going to make ourselves better, it's got to come from us. It ain't coming from them, because they will actually, I've heard correction officers, outwardly talk that they need us here, because if we not here, they're going to lose their jobs. And as you may know, the less prisoners come into prison, they start cutting staff. So they have an incentive not to actually educate you and teach you. So that's the real root of rehabilitation. And RTA is not the only program that has done some spectacular work as far as rehabilitation. You got Hudson Lane.
Before you get there, I'm going to ask you about those other programs in a second. So don't.
Yeah, okay. Don't chop it up too much. Don't gobble it up too much.
Yeah. Hold on. Hold your fire. Brent, as a civilian coming in from the outside,
all right,
what do you feel like is missing? What was not said in the film that?
Well, I don't know what wasn't said in terms as primarily important. What I do know is that the miracle of what theater does in terms of having see other people as real is the central thing. This is why this program is so important. When you take on a role, you have to step into the life of another person. You have to see through their eyes. And as soon as you do that, it's a first step in empathy. It happens right now in this nation. We actually have one of our leaders, Elon Musk, saying that empathy is the enemy of the nation. I differ. And I think we have to choose which side we are on, because it is empathy that has people see one another as real and not harm one another, not deprecate one another. The move in this country to see other people as other is something that men in prison have suffered all along. They have been seen as the other. They're not really human. They're not really completely like us. They're those animals, those people inside. So wrong. And I'm very proud that the movie shows that people inside are real human individuals. It's what I experienced for 10 years. It was amazing. And the proof is in the numbers. In the United States, over 60% of people released from prison return to prison within 3 years.
Right.
Men who come through our program, under 3% have ever gone back to prison. So that is an astonishing fact, and it is because there's a central change in how they see the world. And in terms of the corrections officers, this is very interesting, because I experienced it from another way. When I came in the first time, one of the corrections officers cornered me. And he goes, "Why the hell are you coming in to help these guys just fool us better than they already do? You're just going to get them so they're better at pulling the wool over our eyes." And I said, "Well, give me 6 months. Let's see what happens." So I didn't see him again. 2 years later, I was coming back from the shop where the sets were being built, and one of the corrections officers was escorting me, and he said, "Oh, it's lunchtime, come on in and have lunch with us." So I'm thinking, oh God, I'm going in to have lunch with the COs, woo! And they were very cordial and very nice to me and everything. And a man came up and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "Honestly, no." And he said, I'm the one that cornered you that first day when you came in and said, "Why the hell are you coming in here?" And he stuck out his hand and he said, "I just want to thank you," because he said, "You've made my life so much easier. The way these men have changed is just the most remarkable thing I've ever seen." He said, I don't hate coming to work anymore." And then he leans over and he says to me, "You think I might be able to audition for one of those shows sometimes?" So the change is remarkable. And if you can have people in prison seeing corrections officers as more real, which our men did, they treated them with respect. That garnered the corrections officers treating our men with more respect. I'm not going to say they were perfect, but to call, rather than just saying, you know, hey, fucker, up against the wall, call it Mr. So-and-so, could you do this? You know, that is a huge, huge change. It's what we have to have, and as a national movement, is to see one another as real. That is the one thing that is going to change this country, and not fall for this garbage that if we somehow elevate ourselves by making some other people to look down on, that we're going to be big shots. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Before we talk a little bit more about what RTA meant to each one of you, I want to ask something that Divine started to kind of hint at a little bit. You know, of course, many of you on this panel know each other from experiences outside of RTA. I understand that Shakori and Divine G, you all met as law clerks at Sing Sing.
In that law library.
In the law library, and a lot of and a lot of the Sing Sing cast members also participated in theology programs and other programming together. I'm just kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit, if you could discuss a little bit about the programs you did participate in, and the inside and what those programs meant to you. If there were other programs that maybe not approached the impact that RTA had, but other programs that you thought were effective or helpful, or not effective and not helpful at all. And maybe we'll start with you, Shakori, and then we'll move to Divine, because he had started he had a list of programs too.
Well, besides RTA and other arts program, theater programs, because I when I had left Sing Sing, I went to Otisville and founded an extension called Story Arts and Theater Collaborative. And it was a much smaller program, didn't have as many accolades or, you know, widespread support.
But he was good.
And thanks to Brent and, you know, other volunteers who came in and witnessed the magic and were convinced, you know. The other programs that I think are worthy of mentioning, number one on my list would be Hudson Link.
Definitely.
Hudson Link was, I think, the first independently funded college program. It didn't rely on state or federal funding. It was all done collectively by people who cared, who said, you know what, we want to have people come out of prison a lot more educated than what they came in. And that created an impact that I think over maybe the almost 15 years it's been in existence, like Brent just mentioned, the proof is in the numbers. And the recidivism rate amongst those who completed those programs, those educational programs, higher learning with either an associate's, bachelor's, or a master's degree, we're under 1%. So let me tell you the reason why. When you sit someone down in a classroom who has never really done graduate work, never been exposed to the college scene, there's a level of curiosity in the mind that occurs that just wants you to just soak up as much as you can. Because the little tiny world that you're living in physically can be broadened mentally by the knowledge that you're learning with society, with finance, with history. And you know, for the first time when you're learning these things and you become passionate about it, what happens is that you become a dedicated student, a dedicated and committed student that just really wants to, you know, use these newfound skills of learning. And I think that's what happened in my case, and I'm sure most of the men and women who went through college programs behind the wall can attest to the fact that it just broadens the mind to such an extent that you feel the growth. You can actually taste it, because it's allowing you to speak in ways you haven't before. You're learning new vocabulary, you're learning new concepts, you're learning new ways to think about things and to perceive things and to strategize. And it was such a refreshing way of putting things into mental perspective that you start to wonder, wow, my previous way of thinking was so childish, so immature. And I'm now starting to see that I have a more of a mental gymnastics that I can perform to be able to understand things that other people talk about and I would just pretend to understand. And I'm really grasping it. So there's a sense of pride in that. And it kind of reinforces your desire to keep learning, to keep being a committed student, and to finally walk before an audience and get your diploma.
That's incredibly powerful. Divine, I want to ask you the same question. Other sorts of programs that you found really powerful, really effective during your journey.
Absolutely. I would say the New York Theological Seminary was absolutely important. That's a master's degree program. That's like a higher level of education. And I acquired a master's degree when I was there, and it was a supreme challenge. And I couldn't have gotten there without Hudson Link. So Hudson Link played an absolute instrumental role in that whole process. But there was other programs, and one in particular, I was the president of the NAACP for like almost a decade in Sing Sing. And although it was a program that was allowed through the facility, but because of the fact that when we got in there, we put our own little love and energy, and I put a little special touch to it, we were able to take those programs and use them to, elevate ourselves and make ourselves stronger. I used to sponsor like Black history classes, cultural awareness classes. We taught a class called Consensia. It was like the offspring of a Spanish class. We were just creating classes, and we were allowed to do that. And instead of us using it in just a superficial way, we were literally using it to expand the educational programs in a sense by teaching these individuals not only just, Black history, we was teaching them problem-solving situations, because when things would happen in the yard, we would use scenarios. Well, what if this scenario was this way and this way? How would you solve it? So, in essence, it was a very strong program, even though it was somewhat allowed by the facility. And bear this in mind, although the facility may allow programs, it's what we bring to those programs to make them greater, better, and more effective, and make them more helping to each other. And most of us that were running those inmate programs and inmate organizations and things of that nature were kind of like college educated. We were in the college classes, and then we would take it and use it to share it with the ones who weren't in college. So we was, taking our programs and still helping and expanding. Actually, in one of my NAACP sponsored classes, we had like a basic education class that expanded of what the school was doing, because the school had a basic education class, but oftentimes it was very superficial. Sometimes when we put our little magic touch to it, we bring something else to that whole equation. We bring, a certain energy, a certain passion, a certain amount of just forcefulness. And bear in mind this, when you deal with people relate more better when they can identify with a person who's been through their struggle, know where he's at, and can see through his eyes. And to keep it real, to keep it frank, when we were teaching some of them young guys, they would look up to us because of who we were. Like in my NAACP class as the president, running inmate organizations, going to school, running RTA, in the law library. I was kind of like a counselor, a guidance counselor, where they would come to me for advice. So a lot of times the prison violence was going down because it wasn't just about those in the program, it was about those in the program who were connecting with those who weren't in the program and actually communicating with them on the level that they could relate. And oftentimes, one of the equations I think I use really quite effectively, I used to ask them, listen, you see this glass of water here? It's a clean glass of water here, right? You see this glass of water here? Got filth in it, got hair on it, got all kind of stuff floating around in here. Which glass are you going to eat from? Which one you going to choose? It's a no-brainer. I'm going to take this one. So oftentimes we would show them that, you see this is what's happening with this, and equate it with the chaos and the confusion and negative thinking, the lack of motivation to really want to motivate yourself, and then show them this is the clean glass, and show them some of the things that we doing and this and that, and showing them that oftentimes if you find a way to resolve situations through an aspect of just communicating and listening and following certain basic, respect for one another, you'll come out with this glass. So it was an equation that worked, and oftentimes it was a class project that we used to do. So in a nutshell, classes that we were actually motivating and teaching, I think we were more effective. Now I'm gonna say another thing. When I was in Attica, right? And Attica, as you may know, is probably one of the worstest jails in New York State, brutal. I was an all-points grievance clerk. And although as a grievance clerk, my mission, a grievance, for anyone who don't understand what a prison grievance clerk program is about, is that we go around the facility and we kind of find out what the grievances is, and we try to help find them, and we process them. They go through some hearings or whatever. But the reason why I think it was effective for me, because I came in there with a whole different mission. My mission was to try to bring down some of the chaos, to try to find ways to bring people together. And although it was, once again, a state-sponsored program, what you bring to that program distinguishes whether it's going to be effective or not. And when I was there, I think I neutralized like about 6-7 stabbings. 6-7 stabbings just by being an all-points clerk, because you got to bear in mind, in Attica, you got 4 different facilities. You got A, B, and C, and D block. So you got violence that's stirring up in one block. This guy got a beef with this one over here, and when he get here, I'm gonna kill him. You got this one over here that he gonna go ahead and do this. So as a all-points grievance clerk, I could move around and kind of communicate and diffuse situations and say, yo, listen, bro, this is, and try to talk sense into people. So by the time they come together, it's you narrow down the violence a bit. And just by being able to move, you can do that. Without your ability of being a clerk, you can't do that. If you're a grievance clerk, you're done. You're stuck in that area. So you don't have the power to move and diffuse.
So I want to circle back a little bit to the film and to the experiences of that were unfolding with RTA. And I actually want to ask you, Brent, you lead the cast oftentimes through these exercises, acting exercises. You ask them to walk like someone who's won the lottery, or walk like a zombie, or introduce themselves, or introduce their character in some sort of way. I'm curious, was there a warm-up exercise that you continued to go back to because you found it so impactful? Like, how did you decide how you're gonna warm up? Like, was there some tell me the process, explain the process for us, please.
Well, one of the big things is, when you're in prison, you sort of got to keep hard face, because someone will take advantage if they think there's a softness or something. They're going to take advantage of you. So one of the first things to do, and certainly for me coming in, I'm a theater guy. I've been a theater director, producer in New York for many, many years, and then I worked with Al Sharpton for 3 years doing civil rights work, and then went to teach at Sing Sing. And there was kind of this wonderful continuum that went on. But going in, I didn't know what to expect, and people were saying to me, "Well, how are you gonna do acting classes with these guys? This is well, God, I deal with New York actors all the time. How big a challenge is this?" So the big thing is just to let people be human, and it's the thing that was in that wonderful exercise about go to your most perfect place and tell where you were. That tells so much about a person. But one of the huge things is the ability to be silly. It's to give a person the permission to be silly and show that vulnerability. I'll never forget, I was teaching an improv class, And we were standing in a circle. We had just begun. Most of the guys hadn't done improv before. And I said, okay, everybody's going to become an inanimate object. Yeah, right. So I thought, well, I better start somewhere. So there was this guy, his name is Spider. He's about 6'4", tall, skinny guy. And I pointed at Spider and I said, Spider, you're a tomato. And God bless him, Spider dropped to the floor, curled up in a little ball, then extended his arm up like this as a stem and had a little leaf going like that. The other guys cracked up, and it gave everybody permission. And within minutes, one person was a pogo stick, and one was a TV set, and one was something else, you know. So you have those things, and you'd have to find out what is it that we're going for. When we did Of Mice and Men, our warm-up exercises were quite different because you had men dealing with the issues of death and murder and mercy killing in Of Mice and Men that happened to be very close to what was happening in their lives. Mm-hmm. So I had to tread very, very softly and find out what are these things that we're dealing with here. So the wonder of what takes place can't be overemphasized. That's all I can say. And the moment, for instance, the moment in Of Mice and Men where Candy's dog is taken out and shot. We were in rehearsal, and the man playing, it was Spider again, he was playing Candy. And I saw him just go on his crib as that gunshot went off, and you just saw his whole body contract and pull up. And I found out later that he'd had that experience as a child. His father had taken out and shot his pet dog, and he was reliving it. And so we have to know what it is our fellow man is enduring. And I think right now, and I'm going to keep bringing this back because we're in a situation in this nation right now that is hellish.
It's going to get worse, too.
We have an attempt to make it completely irrelevant what people are going through. It's just going to be, we're going to cut this, we're going to do this, we're going to implement that, we're going to do this, we're going to deport those people. And that is not going to happen to my brother here, I'll tell you. 100%. We are going to get a pardon for Shakur because he belongs here. He has always belonged here. He is an asset to this country, and it has got to happen. And for Divine, we have to have an exoneration. Absolutely, it has to happen, and we ask you to all cooperate with that. But if we're going to save this nation, we have to be thinking about one another as real. And I read that there's some term from video games that's being used about people as DPMs or something. They're like the discardable characters. Do people know what that is?
NPCs.
Yeah, NPC. You see. And just considering some of the people, these irrelevant characters, we can't have it. And the reason the beautiful, and I'm proud that I'm quoted in the end of this movie saying, who would have thought that the change for the world would begin behind the walls of Sing Sing? Because that's exactly what is happening. If people look and see what's happening in this film, there's the message for how to save this country.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have a few minutes left, so I want to try and get through as many questions as I can in that time we have. Since you brought it up, Brent, I want to ask Shakur. You were incarcerated at Sing Sing and other New York State prisons for 25 years. And after you were released, you had this devastating experience of spending another 7 months in immigration detention. I just want to have you talk about, or ask you to talk about, the similarities and differences between those two experiences.
Yeah. Okay. So, I came home in 2015, March 2015, and for 5 years I was rebuilding my life. And things weren't always perfect, but I had a trajectory. And then July of 2020 came, and I found myself back in chains, which I would have put my life on it. I vowed would never happen ever again if I had any say so.
Right.
So it was a completely surreal moment. If you could imagine the nightmare you never thought that you would ever have, because it's too nightmarish to have, that was that moment. To find myself back inside of concrete, steel, inside of a cell, I was so confused. Who's playing this cruel joke? Those 7 months that I had to endure at Bergen County Jail were more difficult than 7 years in Sing Sing. Because it was so hollow. It was empty. There was a void that you just could not find anything to fill unless it was in your head. So I cried every night, brother. Wasn't a night that I didn't feel hopeless. I don't know what carried me through. Had to be like, my family just rooting for me on the outside, along with the growing number of supporters who would say, hold on, brother, we're gonna get you out. And for the first time, I realized there was something that was worse than the incarceration that happens as a result of a criminal conviction. It's called deportation. It's malicious. And, as Brent was so eloquently pointing out, it goes back to that decision to eradicate empathy. Because the only way you can really see you handcuffing someone, putting shackles on their feet, chains around their waist, throwing them in back of a van and driving them down to Federal Plaza as if they're a criminal fugitive, is if you don't have empathy for the person that you're affecting at that point. You can't sit there across from me and look me in the eye and see an animal. You have eyes as a human being to see me as a human being. But you've decided that you're going to throw on these blinders or these lenses that changes that reality. So yes, there is something worse than a criminal conviction in which you end up doing time behind the wall, and it's the time that you're spent in a void, not knowing what can happen if you're going to be on a plane heading to the southern border next week. 53 years in this country. And somehow I'm not American? I don't know how somebody fixes their mouth to even suggest that I'm a foreigner in my own home. So it's something we need to have a serious conversation that cannot exclude the meaningful understanding of being empathetic.
I do want to make one final comment. I know you saw the movie. I did 25 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit, found overwhelming evidence of my innocence, couldn't get out. That parole board scene was taken straight out of the transcript.
I was going to ask you about.
Straight
I was
out
actually
of
going
the
to ask you about that
transcripts.
parole board scene.
Yeah. You was going to move to that? I must be reading your mind, huh?
But the same way. I do want to. I mean, I know we're supposed to end at 9, but I'm gonna. If you all give me the indulgence to end at like 9:10, that's cool. Or not. Or if you got to go, you got to go. That's fine. But I have questions I want to ask, and I want you all to hear the answers to. If you could tell us about the parole board scene, because they weaponized the program and against you, and really tried to, I think, use it. I mean, we all saw what happened, right?
Exactly.
And so if you could just tell us like what that experience was like, what you felt you were up against when you're trying to seek your freedom, seek your release, right? And then I want to invite you to kind of continue your thoughts about what else you were going to say.
Well,
your case.
that moment, I could tell you this: Coleman Domingo, he should have won that Academy off that alone.
I agree with that.
He hit his marks. Like I said, we took that straight out of the transcripts, word for word. You know, but I mean, it wasn't as short as it was. It was a little longer in the sense that they asked me about the evidence. They gave me time to talk in detail about the evidence of my innocence. You know, we couldn't go into that in intricate detail because it was long, but we caught the essence of each moment. But at that moment when they asked me that, it was like I do all this work to create a program that's helping people. Acting is not about teaching people how to deceive people. Acting was used as a mechanism to teach you life skills, to teach you how to connect with each other, to teach you how to humanize yourself, to teach you, something positive, not to use it as trickery. And like you said, they flipped that whole thing on me. It's like, okay, you created a program to make, to become a trickster. So it really hurt it. It was amazing. But I wanted to put emphasis on the fact that right now, me and my attorneys, we have a petition that we created. It's called www.freedivang.org. It's a petition that we're doing because right now I have a conviction review complaint that has been pending in the district attorney's office for 7 years. 7 years, they just been sitting on this complaint. And basically it breaks down all my evidence of innocence, and they should either exonerate me or deny it and let me go to court. They don't want to do any of that. So what they're doing now is they just got me sitting in legal limbo. So all I'm asking you guys to do is go to www.freedivang.org, read the evidence of the innocence, and make your own assessment, and please sign that petition and encourage others to do it, because that will have an impact enough to tell them that people are interested in this and people are getting tired of this injustice, and those numbers help. So once again, www.freedivang.org and sign the petition.
Great. Thank you, Divine. I actually want to go down the line and ask Shakori, what can folks do to help you, to support you? How can we get involved?
Anybody got the personal number to Governor Hochul?
Yeah.
So right now, probably the most efficient way to end this nightmare is to get a pardon from the governor. Mm-hmm. And I've been trying to do that since Governor Patterson. Okay? This is governor number 3 now. And what we've been trying to do, myself and my amazing advocacy team and legal team, is similar to what Divine G is doing, is get a petition going and a letter writing campaign. So the letters of, that you may write could be boilerplate template, as you would find in the resource, or you could speak your mind in your own words, either or. But there's a QR code, I think, on some of the material that they're handing out. Right. Just scan it. It'll take you to a web app that'll allow you to have a number of action points that you can take. You can be directed to the website which gives you additional material about some of the campaign events we've had, some of the press that we've been covered by, you know, an introduction to the story itself. Who am I? You know, he's like, who's this guy? You know, I heard him talk. He may have made a few good points, but I don't know if I really know him to sign a petition or make a statement. But with those resources, you can have, you know, enough material there to kind of make up your mind.
There you go.
You know, and I hope that you do. So with that, I think we, at least for me and my family, we're humbly grateful for the many, many, many faces, the many handshakes, the many prayers, and, you know, signatures. You know, we garnered in 2020, while I was at Bergen County, over 30,000 signatures because people were upset that something like this could happen. And it could be their cousin, it could be their uncle, it could be their nephew. And it was just so absurd, you know? So, but yeah, so we're grateful. And I appreciate everyone who, if you just give it a moment's thought of consideration, I'm grateful for that, you know?
Exactly.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then, Brent, I want to ask you, you know, in this film, the movie shows a lot of different ways that people can be allies, an ally to someone. And I'm curious, like, what are you hoping that people will take away from the RTA program, from this experience, from the film, that will allow people to make a difference in other people's lives? What are you hoping the lesson that people will draw from?
One, support programs like this. They are always in need of financial support. That's all it is, and nobody's getting paid to do it, but at least, you know, pay for their gas to drive the 3 hours they drive to get to a prison in Western New York. That's one thing. Two, find out if you can volunteer yourself. There are many things that we can do, but one of the most important things we can all do is take an active interest in people coming home from prison. That is such an important thing. The adjustment people go through and the needless hurdles that are put in front of them is absolutely crucial. Just to come home, thank you. I mean, this is really something. A man is released from prison. He's given a little piece of paper that they call his ID card. He goes to get a driver's license, a state ID, an official state ID, and they go, well, that's not sufficient. You have to have such and such a letter from the Social Security office. So you go to the Social Security office, and the Social Security office goes, we can't give you anything about that until you have your driver's license. And it goes back and forth like round robin for month after month after month. My wife and I have experienced it because men have lived with us when they come home, and we've watched this happen. It's the most frustrating thing in the world.
I'm sure Divine and Shakur could tell you
absolutely.
first-hand experience, right? Yeah.
And so be compassionate if there are people. Look for opportunities to be useful, to find work for them, to do any way that you can find that you can be useful, I think is the first thing. And then spread the word that seeing other people as real is number one job for us all. I just don't think that we can ever say that different, because if we start doing that on a huge, wide scale and put aside the great temptation to lessen another person in our eyes in order to build ourselves up in some way, we're going to be making great progress. And we can do it as individuals, we can do it as a group, and we can do it as a country. And I think that is the great message of this film.
So, thank you. So www.freediving.org.
Very simple. www.freediving.org. It's very simple. We kept it real simple.
There's a melody for it if you'd like to know.
Corey, there's plenty of resources that we can check out, sign petitions, and support your cause.
So we also have a website. It's www.preventfamilyseparation.org.
Okay, www.preventfamilyseparation.org.
Yep.
Brent, thank you for all you've done.
Thank you so much.
Corey, thank you for all you've done. Divine G, thank you for all you've done. You're actually also a phenomenal actor too. I saw you in that little early scene. Well done. Well done.
Actually, I taught half of the guys in the program, man.
I know. I can tell. Why don't you join me in thanking this phenomenal panel?
I was the lead.
And thanks so much to the folks who organized tonight's event. It was really a wonderful conversation, and so glad to see you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Professor Sutherland and to our panelists for coming. Thank you for everyone for staying for this really wonderful conversation. So we have these. This has the Venmo for Parole Advocacy to keep donating to their mutual aid funds. Shakori's petition, which he mentioned about this website that he built himself. And Divine G's campaign to overturn his conviction. We also passed out these postcards to Governor Hochul demanding that she grant Shakori his pardon. If you can just fill in your address, we'll mail them. You can put them up here. You can leave them where you are. You can hand them to me. And we also have some blank postcards outside on the table if anyone wants to write their own message. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.